Welcome back to Tales from Our Dark Past. Bridgerton Season 3 is finally here, and fans are obsessed with Colin and Penelope's incredible glow-up as they're thrown into their roles as this season's leading love story. Penelope and Colin's transformation into leading characters has been clear to see. The trailer literally gave me goosebumps. They look absolutely stunning. But how realistic is their glow-up compared to the real London Regency Era? And will Bridgerton's huge popularity bring back some of these Regency beauty trends? In this video, we'll be exploring Penelope's Season 3 makeover and how it compares to the real history of the times. One of the first but more subtle things I noticed about Penelope's Season 3 makeover was those gorgeous, sparkling eyes. I mean, firstly, Nicola Coughlan, who plays Penelope, has the most beautiful eyes. I don't think I've ever seen a shot of her where she hasn't had just the most captivating and gorgeous gaze. But in this season, I noticed that her eyes were even more emphasized and beautiful than usual, and they also seemed to look quite watery. This was most likely because of the depth of the emotions and strong feelings she's having at the time, rather than for historical accuracy. But watery eyes was actually a very real beauty trend of the Regency era. Back then, it was seen as desirable to have slightly watery eyes, and women would go to great lengths to achieve this teary-eyed look, even risking going blind in the process. Ladies would often put drops of citrus or perfume in their eyes to achieve that watery look. And as if squirting lemon juice in your eyes wasn't painful enough, they'd also use belladonna eye drops, which would really make the eyes water, as well as dilating the pupils to make the eyes appear bigger and more attractive. But belladonna is also known by its nickname, Deadly Nightshade, because of how toxic and poisonous it is. Yet this didn't stop this harmful ingredient from being used in the name of beauty. The side effects of taking belladonna include blurred vision, hallucinations, a racing heartbeat, fever, and an inability to pass water or sweat. So it's no wonder that they're flapping their fans and fainting all over the place. The results of using belladonna eye drops could even cause blindness in extreme cases where the drops were used repeatedly at high quantities for a long time. And characters like Penelope and Cressida may have done this. After all, they were on their third season, and they'd have still been doing all they can to look as desirable as possible. So there is a very real chance that a lady like Penelope really would have started the season with a little extra sparkle in her eye in the hopes to outshine the competition. As well as looking like he was about to burst into tears, complexion was also very important in the Regency era, and ladies of high society would be expected to keep themselves as pale as possible. We see this in Bridgerton when Lady Featherington snaps at Penelope to get away from the window so that she doesn't begin to look like a freckled beggar. This is because being tanned or freckled was associated with having to spend a lot of time outdoors, working hard for a living. And these were just the types of people that high society would try to set themselves apart from. But wanting to look as though you were too wealthy to work wasn't the only reason why members of high society wanted to look pale. For some peculiar reason, appearing like you had tuberculosis was a very popular look back then. The awful illness had been so romanticized for its perceived beauty benefits that women would even try to catch it on purpose, putting their lives on the line just to benefit from the horrible side effects. It caused rapid weight loss, which created a tiny waist and a gaunt, skinny appearance. The skin would also look translucently pale, and the cheeks and lips were pink and rosy from fever. The illness itself is awful to suffer, but yet somehow this became the desired beauty standard of the time. Unfortunately, even for those women who were considerably more sensible than the ones who were trying to inflict deadly diseases upon themselves, the safer alternatives might not really be all that safe. Ladies would usually wear bonnets when outside and carry parasols to protect themselves from the sun and seek shade wherever possible. But in more extreme efforts to keep a pale complexion, many women would bathe themselves in arsenic and cover themselves in powders and enamels that were made from toxic substances like mercury and lead in a bid to achieve as pale a complexion as possible. They would even nibble on wafers made from arsenic, and some would even go as far as to paint thin blue veins over their pale skin. It seemed the aim was to look as sickly and as close to death as they possibly could. The toxic ingredients in the makeup usually left the skin more damaged and blemished than it was before. But instead of seeing the damage they were doing to themselves and stopping using it, they'd simply apply more and more each time in a desperate cycle and attempt to conceal all the damage they were doing to their skin. And it was said that once you started using these cosmetics, that you could never stop. But thankfully for Penelope and the other Bridgerton ladies, makeup was frowned upon in high society at the time. It was all about showing off your natural beauty, and having a fresh-faced, natural look was the aim. Heavy makeup was only socially acceptable for older women, actors, and ladies of the night. So very little makeup would have been worn by the young women entering society, and the makeup they did wear would have been very subtle, with the hope to look like no makeup was being worn at all. The most popular and socially acceptable cosmetic products in the Regency period was rouge and lip colourings. And these would have been used very sparingly, with just enough to create natural-looking rosy cheeks and slightly tinted lips. During this time, most makeup would have been homemade, and large stately homes would normally have a still room, which is short for distillery. We see Marina Thompson rummaging through the Featherington still room whilst looking for ingredients to make a medicinal tea, and this is where makeup would have been made too. These were usually made with animal fats and oils, and then dyed with things like strawberries, herbs, beetroot, and flowers. But some less pleasant ingredients were also used, including beetles and vermilion, which is also known as red mercury and is highly toxic. In season 3, we see Penelope delicately glide her finger over her lips, applying some Regency-era lip tint. Just like her eyes, her lips are more emphasized in this season too, and look completely irresistible. As Penelope and Colin are this season's leading love story, her lips look extra kissable for those close-up longing stares and intense kissing scenes. Another important part of Penelope's glow-up is her new hairstyle, and although the changes seem subtle and the look is still in keeping with her character, the transformation is huge. Her glamorous new curls really show the audience just how much she's grown and blossomed into a woman over the last 2 seasons. Her new look is more mature and seductive than we've seen her before, and shows Penelope take her quest to secure a husband far more seriously, as there's so much on the line for her this season if she doesn't. But what went into creating those amazing hairstyles in the Regency era, and how accurate are the hairstyles featured in Bridgerton? In the London Regency era, the favoured hairstyle for women was usually a simple bun that was worn high enough so that it could be seen and admired from the front. Plaits and braids were also incorporated, and tight ringlet curls would hang down and frame the face. During balls or special events, these updo hairstyles would be accessorized with tiaras, combs, flowers, ribbons, feathers, and an array of beautiful ornaments. Regency hairstyles were influenced by the tight curls worn by the ancient Greeks and Romans that they saw in art, sculptures, and antiques, as these items started making their way into museums and into pop culture, inspiring everything from architecture to fashion. These beautiful curls would be created with paper or fabric curlers, which the hair was wrapped around and secured, then slept in overnight to achieve a tight curl by morning. Very basic hair curling tongs also existed in the 1800s, but using them came with risks. The tongs were normally heated directly over the fire or in an oven, and controlling the temperature was almost impossible. A piece of paper would often be used to cover either the tongs or the hair in an attempt to protect the hair, but it was often singed, and in some cases it would be burnt so badly that it would burn off completely, removing the entire clump that was being curled. Using these early curling tongs could also easily lead to head, neck, and facial burns, and fingers and hands were at risk of being burnt whilst they were being used. The hairstyles that we see in Bridgerton are often over-dramatised versions of the hairdos from the past, with Queen Charlotte's hair being particularly over the top and glamorous. But this might not be as unrealistic as it appears. As Queen Charlotte is one of the older characters and royalty, her fashion may have still likely been inspired by the early Georgian period and French fashions like that of Marie Antoinette. The more natural and simplified Greek-inspired look came slightly later, and these earlier over-the-top hairstyles didn't completely fade out by the late Georgian period when Bridgerton was set. And while we're on the topic of hair, I did think when I watched Penelope and Colin's steamy carriage ride that as he romantically swept his hand up Penelope's leg, I couldn't help but wonder if and how she would have shaved her legs. And it turns out she probably wouldn't have. Although women had been removing body hair since ancient times, women's hair removal didn't really take off in Europe until the early 20th century, when dresses became shorter and more revealing. So ladies during Bridgerton times wouldn't have shaved their legs, underarms, or body hair, and the natural look would have been completely normal and acceptable at the time. Eyebrows were well groomed and unibrows were removed, but body hair wasn't seen as an issue at all. Today, we'd cringe at the thought of forgetting to shave our legs, and our biggest crush getting a feel of our prickly leg hairs would feel like an absolute nightmare, but back then it was completely normal. And because the skin hadn't been through years of shaving and hair removal, which can make the hair grow back thicker, darker, and coarser, it's likely that the hair wouldn't have even been that noticeable anyway. Colin wouldn't have been bothered one bit that Penelope hadn't shaved her legs, and she wouldn't have felt at all self-conscious about her body hair, as it just really wasn't thought about. Penelope Featherington is Bridgerton's famous wallflower, and in the show she struggled to feel desirable and gain the male attention that the ladies of the season hope for. Although fans widely believe that Penelope is one of the most beautiful characters on the show, she's portrayed as one of the least desirable and worries that she'll become a spinster. In earlier episodes, we even see Penelope's sisters, Prudence and Philippa, make fun of her with mean comments about her weight and how she won't find a husband. But in reality, Penelope's curves could have made her even more attractive in high society, and it's unlikely that she would have gone unnoticed and left to become a wallflower. Being extremely overweight was still seen negatively back then, but being curvy was seen as an attractive sign of wealth and high status. Things like having a slightly plumper figure, thick thighs, a full cleavage, a rounded face, and a larger bottom were all attractive features of the times. Even cellulite dimples were highly desirable. And although this seems to contradict the beauty standards of the era, where everyone is trying to look as deathly thin as possible, but because of what these features would mean about a person, they were viewed very positively. Being curvy showed that you were wealthy, that you and your family always had plenty of food available, and that you didn't have to work hard to get by. And at a time when everyday life for the average person was so difficult, these features would be harder to come by. So it's likely that Penelope's gorgeous, curvy figure would have been helpful for her and her marriage prospects. And much to her sister's disappointment, she would have likely turned heads and had a long line of dance partners and potential suitors calling on her. Another potential issue that we'd see as a bit of a romance ruiner today is the awful smell of body odour and stale sweat. Those stunning dresses and ball gowns certainly looked amazing, but they were also thick and heavy to wear. Ladies would often get very hot and sweaty, even with their hand fans to help them. And washing the dresses was no easy feat. It took hard work and a long time to get the dresses clean again. Women would usually wear layers of undergarments and use pads under their arms to absorb sweat in an attempt to keep the dresses clean. Personal hygiene was becoming more important at the time, and people would use a basin and pitcher to wash themselves in the mornings and evenings, but bathing in a tub would still be quite rare. Perfumes were widely used by both men and women to try to mask the unpleasant smells, but it's likely that we'd find the stench of everyday life quite off-putting today. I hope that you enjoyed this video about the real Bridgerton era beauty trends. Don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to our channel for more interesting Bridgerton facts and other historical videos. Thank you for watching Tales from Our Dark Past. We hope to see you again soon.